I'm wearing sunglasses indoors because I'm an arsehole, and this is another episode of A Few Good Reviews where I run down albums that have come out lately. Too many albums come out, man. You know, David Rowe, I feel you on that too many releases video. I feel you, man. And this is just another segment where I run down my quick thoughts on some albums that have come out because I want to talk about them, but I just don't have enough to say, or you know the drill with music. It's hard, man. First, I'm going to talk about here is the Lump album. Laura Marling is a part of this project, and yeah, it's pretty fine. I just don't really feel like it has as much impact as any Laura Marling solo project. Although I haven't heard the previous album that came from Lump, which I believe came out about 10 years ago. Never caught onto that album. But yeah, this new one is fine. It's a folk album with some other elements blemished into, you know, like that kind of like electronic sound, but a bit of like just sort of like post rock type thing with the sort of like slow ambient drones that go on with this album. It's fine, it just doesn't really appeal to me in that kind of way. Again, Laura Marling's music has a little bit more substance to this, in my opinion. Usually there's an interesting lyrical theme that goes through her albums, whereas I feel like this one didn't really have that. Karen Jonas, I really loved her debut album that came out in 2016, was on my year-end list, so if you're a country fan, make sure you check that one out because I know it wasn't really talked about in that big kind of way. But this new album, Butter, is a good, decent follow up. I think it's a solid album, but my issue is that it just doesn't really get me in that kind of way with some of the lyrical themes. I mean, some lyrical themes are great, but just like with like the Yellow Brick Road type thing feels a little cliche. If there are some cliches across this album, and I just don't really don't really care for. But generally, the arc that she has set on this album, in the sense that she's, you know, talking a lot about the man that did her wrong. She has some pretty funny lines in reference to that. She has some good songs in reference to that. Mr. Wonka is fucking great. I mean, that's totally like my shit, man. That song is just like from what Foxygen's Hang that came out last year. It's just that kind of like over the top, grandiose, extravagant ridiculousness that I just love. And yeah, that track is amazing. But everything else on this album, I'm kind of lukewarm with. I think it's pretty solid overall, though. It's got a nice sound to it, so do check it out if you like country. Panda Plane actually hit me up with this album, Intertextuality, and I believe Panda Plane, the person that is behind this project, does everything on the album, does all of the production, all of the singing, and everything that's involved, which I think is really cool. Um, it's very much an indie release, and it has a very indie sound to it as well. I mean, there are some elements of 80s thrown in here, synth pop, that kind of stuff that's just so new wave and so overtly 80s that I do appreciate some of the sounds on this album, I must admit, just for that nostalgic feel. And the instrumental palette on this album is pretty cool as well. I do like how it kind of varies from like synth pop to then like rock elements as well. Like there are some really like buzzing moments that feel quite upbeat and fast paced that I do nod my head along to, which I must admit is pretty cool considering it's all independent here. But I've got to say the vocals to this, not for me, and some of the lyrics as well are pretty cheesy, I must say, on a track like Shadow. Yeah, just not my kind of thing. And the singing, I think, could be a lot better than it is. I'm sure this person, he can improve on his singing as time goes on, but for now it just doesn't quite click with me. Some of the instrumentals, again, are quite cheesy with their sound, and probably because it is 80s influenced, and 80s was just a cheese fest, so perhaps that's not really a fair criticism anyway, because it's kind of like, well, you get what you're given, you know, you should expect that. But just for my taste, it doesn't appeal to me in that kind of way. But there are some cool ideas on this. I will be checking out more projects from this Panda Plane in the future, and yeah, check it out. Do check it out. Rico Nasty, man. Yeah, this is pretty hype, this album. It is full on, just in your face, aggressive, just balls to the wall, hypeness. Rico Nasty's flow is great, her delivery is fantastic. And yeah, I mean, as much as I am kind of underwhelmed by some of the tracks on this album, they do kind of continue to do the same thing over and over again, because like halfway through I do feel like I'm not as interested in what was going on. But just for a few bangers, I mean, occasionally I would go back to some of these songs just for that hype, because they're so short, they're so snappy and to the point that you can't really deny them for what they are, because Rico Nasty at the moment is doing some really cool ideas, and you know, not really jumping on a SoundCloud trend, but I could see you thinking that is this as being that kind of album. But I feel like she has more to her than that. She has some lyrical ideas. Sometimes she's talking about the haters, which is really boring to me and just pointless. But the tracks, the production, you know, Rico Nasty really should have been on that XXL freshman list. Yeah, XXL freshman list. Fucking hell, I can't even speak, man. She should have been on that list because she's definitely got the bright future ahead of her. The talent is there. A lot of bangers here. It's fun. Just for a whole album, the same thing over and over again just kind of wears me down. But yeah, like occasionally some of these tracks would definitely work for me. And finally, I'm going to talk about this Angelique Kidjo album. Shout out to Rick the Life for this one. He turned my head onto this. This is a start to finish cover of the classic album from the Talking Heads, Remain in Light. Something I just was not expecting to ever pop up on my radar, because you know, cover albums are pretty rare. Like, to start to finish covering an album is quite rare. Like, you rarely hear of it, and this one nearly flew by me as well. So I'm pretty glad I caught onto it though, because this is basically what Talking Heads' Remaining Light would have sounded like if it was actually created from an African perspective, because there are heavy African influences on that album, as you already know. But of course, Talking Heads westernized it, made it a bit more pop appealing, gave it a very 80s sheen to it, I suppose. And yeah, man, I think this cover album is pretty great. For the most part, I think some tracks don't really kind of live up to me. Maybe it's because I'm just so used to the original, I don't know. But when things are just like let loose and just go wild, it has an impact. Holy shit. Angelique Kidjo can have such a presence on the mic. Like, holy shit, I can't believe how wild she can be, especially on the first couple of tracks. That's like the best moments on this album. Like, once we get past the first three songs, I must say I do lose it a little bit with my interest. But yeah, man, I think this is a great cover album, and it's really cool to see, like, again, the African influence sounding so authentic, because it's the kind of album that should have been made already, and I'm glad that we got it, because this is really cool. And go check it out. The classic Talking Heads album has been covered here in a very good way. You cannot deny Angelique Kidjo's talent, and anyone else and everyone else that was involved in this album. So yeah, that is it. All the albums I want to talk about. Let me know your thoughts on these albums if you have heard them, and you have any opinions. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. And that's it. Have a good day. Have a good day.